Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Sixto Logan. I am the project director for the BIPOC Arts Network and Fund. Before we continue, I'd like to start with our land acknowledgement. Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed to their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will. Some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hope of a better life. And some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We are living on the ancestral lands of the Karankawa, Kawidakan, Sana, Atakapa Ishak people. We pay respects to their elders, past and present. Since our activities are shared digitally on the internet, let's take a moment to consider the legacy of colonization embedded with the technologies, structures, and ways of thinking that we use every day. We are utilizing equipment and high-speed internet not available to many indigenous communities or communities of color. Even the technologies that are central to much of what art that we are making leaves significant carbon footprints, contributing to the changing climates that disappropriately affect indigenous peoples worldwide. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us here together today. The land acknowledgement was adapted from US Department of Arts and Culture and Adrian Wong from Spider Show in Ontario. So thank you all very much for being here today. We are excited to share with you this opportunity and answer the questions that you might have around this initiative and this round of funding. I'm going to, I think, where's my poll? Here we go. I'm going to end the poll and then we can see and share the results to see who's actually in the room today. So I hope that you all can see the end of the results in terms of we have a number of independent artists, arts organizational staff, as well as board members and community leaders. And then we also have a number of people from Harris County and some of our outer counties in Houston. So thank you all very much for joining us today. So today we are going to, let me just give you an overview of what's happening and so that you have an idea of where we're going to go today. So the overview of BANF is that we are going to give you an overview of the BIPOC Arts Network and Fund. I will discuss a round one funding and its purpose. We will discuss eligibility, and then we'll review the application on submittable, and then we will open up the information to question and answers. Before we go on, I wanted to check in and ask both Deidre and Yedi to actually introduce themselves. Thank you, Yedi. Yedi, can you go ahead?
Absolutely. Hi, my name is Yedi Guevara. I'm the interim director of grants here at Houston Arts Alliance. Very proud to be a partner, technical partner here with the BANF initiative. So thanks for having us, Sixto.
Thanks, Yedi. Deidre.
Hi, everyone. I'm Deidre Thomas. I am now part of a senior advisor with Madison Advisors, a strategic advising agency. And I am also have the pleasure of sitting on the steering committee for the BIPOC Arts Network Fund. So thank you all for having us today. And I'm really excited about this initiative and this initial info session.
Thanks, and please bear with me if technical issues are, it's where we are today. So Mercury retrograde. So also, I wanted also to say that about BANF and a little bit about us and what's happening. So about the BIPOC Arts Network and Fund is a multi-year initiative dedicated to providing resources that support the vibrant BIPOC arts community of Greater Houston in fully displaying their power, values, and traditions. We are excited to introduce this initiative with our first round of funding that will provide over $2 million to eligible organizations and fiscally sponsored artist collectives in Greater Houston's Black, Latinx, Indigenous, Asian American, Pacific Islander, Middle Eastern, and other communities of color. So this groundbreaking effort was made possible, was born out of the Ford Foundation's American Cultural Treasures Initiative, which in September 2020 committed an unprecedented $156 million to support BIPOC arts communities across the country in response to the devastating economic impact of COVID-19 pandemic. The Regional Grant-Making Initiative invested $35 million over 7 regions, including Greater Houston, and invited philanthropic partners to match funding in support of multi-year grant programs for cultural groups of color with exceptional regional and local significance. Houston Endowment and the Ford Foundation led the way for BANF's creation, equally donating $5 million, with additional generous contributions from the Kinder Foundation, the Powell Foundation, the Brown Foundation Incorporated, and the Cullen Foundation. Unlike other regional initiatives, BANF is structured as a collaborative, multi-phase fund and a resource network guided by funders, artists, and nonprofit leaders in the region. We acknowledge this historical underinvestment in the Houston BIPOC arts, the cultures and arts communities, and the initiative aims to increase philanthropic support to collective grant making and facilitate new connections between funders and prospective grantees through shared decision-making authority. So BANF is focusing on grant funding, advocacy, community building, networking initiatives that revolutionize the local funding landscape, break down silos within the arts ecosystem, and welcome everyone to support and learn from BIPOC arts community. I wanted to introduce our steering committee, and Deidre, can you just introduce the members of the steering committee and then the accountability and advisory council?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have several members in the steering committee. Patra Brandon Isaac, who's the Director of Education and Community Projects at Kinder Foundation. Bao Long Chu, with the Senior Program Officer of Houston Endowment. Myself. Francis Valdez, the Executive Director of Houston in Action. Tony Diaz, who is a writer, activist, and political analyst. Adan Medrano, chef, food writer, and filmmaker. And then finally, Kelly Willits, the Director of Professional Development with the Mid-America Arts Alliance.
So we also have an Accountability and Advisory Council who continues to support us on many of our decisions, and they'll be key in relationship to the panel review session at the end of this round. Deidre?
Yeah. So this group is with Sebastian Bonsi, with a photographer and educator, Janice Bond, a cultural architect, art advisor, and interdisciplinary artist, Eureka Gilkey, the executive director of Project Row Houses, Shayna Schlossberg, arts administrator and community organizer, and we have Alicia Nelson Reed, who's the executive director of Powell Foundation, Candace DeMeza, actor, writer, filmmaker, and multidisciplinary artist, Julie DeVries, artist and educator, Marty Carmen Ramirez, Wortham curator of Latin American arts and director of the International Center for the Arts of the American Museum of Fine Arts, Houston. And then finally, Robert Tejada, who is Roy and Lily Kranz Cullen Distinguished Professor at the University of Houston.
Thank you, Deidre. And as we mentioned before, Yedi is actually here with us as a representative of the Houston Arts Alliance, and the Houston Arts Alliance is our operational partner who's here to support our grants and other administrative components of the BIPOC Arts Network and Fund. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this funding opportunity itself and what brings us together. So over the course of the past 18 months, we have suffered compounded traumas from the COVID-19 pandemic, the losses of our family, friends, many of whom were elders in our communities. We suffered through freeze, flooding, weather events, and still we are resilient. We understand the urgency to support our BIPOC arts ecosystem during this challenging time, and we seek to officially award the $2 million this year. In this first round of funding, we are taking a listen and learn approach that is needed by the BIPOC arts organizations and artists. The narrative questions that we are asking you in the application focus on where you are and what you would want to accomplish in the upcoming year. Those answers and the future conversations with you will actually inform how we move forward, how to focus our efforts in future years. We recognize that there are a lot of models and there are a lot of solutions, but we need to find a way and we need to find the ones that will work for Houston and with you. So let me speak of our approach. And of course, this is the wrong slide. Hold on a second. Our approach, there we go, as we go into details about the eligibility and application, we try to develop processes that actually reduce the barriers to entry and ask pertinent questions that focus on the storytelling that can serve in other situations. It's also to relate to information that you already have or believe that you already should have in some of this. The steering committee, the Accountability and Advisory Council, and our national peers who have been working on equitable funding practices have advised us on the guidelines and the process. This is not a perfect application, but we are trying to enact more equitable and empathetic practices based on our own experience as applicants, funders, and artists. So I have been asked by if a grants writer is necessary or what is the best way to create a winning proposal. I hope that the application, when you take a look at it, is asking you to be you and to show us why you do your work and how you do your work and how your work is celebrated by you and your community. I don't believe that it requires a grants writer. I think it's about you and your voice and your organizational voice. The AAC and I have already discussed educational bias implicit in most application processes. The way that the communities of color have to read successfully white in an application to be rewarded. We name that, and we are working against that. The panelists will be directed not to worry about grammar. We are giving the option of providing video on some answers. We're also providing guidelines and application worksheet in Spanish. And if applications needs other translation support, we are collaborating with the Alliance language networks on an as-needed basis. Also, to be clear, we are working and we're continuing to build toward equitable practice because of the timing of this opportunity and because of the current levels of infrastructure. We do require that written responses be in English. Some of the questions must be written responses like organizational history and public service, as these are tools that we hope that you already have, and that they are statements that can be used for other purposes other than just this application. If applicants are interested in submitting video responses in languages besides English or Spanish, please check with us to see how we can be able to support that before you do that. And in this, we are actually talking, we are calling for a nomination of community reviewers. These are leaders in the arts community that may include independent artists, educators, patrons, community leaders, and organizers. The selected reviewers will join BANF's Accountability and Advisory Council to engage in a peer review process to consider the grant applications. The community nominated reviewers should reflect these qualities, experiences, and understandings, that they are objective and knowledgeable about the arts and culture in the greater Houston region, that they are a connector of communities who listens to many different voices, and that they have history of advocating for communities of color, artists, and arts organizations. From the nominated individuals, we will invite community members who will help review our panel to be more selective of the Greater Houston BIPOP art system. Okay, now you can see that right slide, I think. So part of our name is network. We are the BIPOP Arts Network and Fund. We value collaboration and learning. We focus on an ecosystemic approach and how each of us are a valued part of a larger system. We believe that by working together, we strengthen each other and the region, and we can work and be in community with each other. Eligibility. So who is eligible? Nonprofit organizations with arts and cultural programming. So specifically, organizations must have a arts and cultural focus or could be consistently maintain arts and culture programming that is equivalent to 15% of annual operating expenses after capital, and or arts and culture program budget that is 20% of all programmatic expenses. We realize that some of our communities of color don't have an institution that's exclusively dedicated to being an arts institution, but they still have significant arts programming. We see that there's multi-service organizations. We recognize community centers, churches, or other centers in which our communities congregate that celebrate through art and culture. And we hope that you all can be interested in applying. We are also focusing on artist collectives and cultural entities who do not have their own 501c3 designation, but are applying through a fiscal sponsor. An artist collective, in terms of this opportunity, is an initiative that features a group of artists working together to produce work that benefits the BIPOC communities and is fiscally sponsored through a 501c3 organization. Part of this is a recognition that not all arts entities need to be a nonprofit, that sustaining programs and focusing on services to the community is a significant and heavy and important concept. It's an important act. We recognize that many of these efforts from our communities are small endeavors that have mighty influence, and that elements of managing boards are not the focus and historic, and that we are trying to be able to address that. For collectives and artists who have been working more informally, this is a request for you to think about solidifying that relationship through a fiscal sponsor to better serve the long-term vision that supports our communities. We recognize that people who have been putting together or hosting open mic nights or exhibitions or other works in accessible spaces, this is an opportunity in order to think about how to solidify and strengthen the long-term practice and sustain that work. So in order to help support this, we are actually putting together a fiscal sponsor info session on Monday, October 4th, in which we are inviting Fresh Arts, Community Artists Collective, and the Community Music Center of Houston in order to talk about their fiscal arts fiscal sponsorship programs, and to engage in more detailed conversation about fiscal sponsorship. Who is ineligible? Educational institutions that lead to degree or diploma, including to, or not limited to, private public scholarships. Okay, sorry. K through 12 educational institutions, municipal or county agencies and departments. And then also this is, and individual artists are not eligible to apply at this point. We recognize that individual artists are an essential part of our community. But right now, with the time frame that we have, and how we are guided by the initial Ford Foundation initiative that supported arts and cultural organizations that are engaging artists and communities, that this is, it's going to take us a little bit more time to understand how to best serve and work with our individual artist communities. And so we are going to have to take a little bit more time and more conversations in order to make that happen. Geographic boundaries. Applicants whose address is located and serve the 9-county region of Greater Houston. So for fiscally sponsored projects, the fiscal agent does not need to be in the 9-county region, but the organization and the must be here and must serve our communities. We also expanded the ideas to recognize the Greater Houston area, to understand that many of our communities do not live within specific boundaries, and that the work actually happens in multiple places. And part of the opportunity here is to invite people who are outside of Harris County, who might not always get the support, in order to engage us and so that we can recognize their work and amplify it. So BIPOC history and leadership, it's founded by, led, and serving Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Pacific Islander, and Asian, and other communities of color. That means that the organization and collective was founded by a member of the BIPOC community, and that 60% plus of the current staff or leadership are identified as Black, Latinx, Indigenous, Asian American, Pacific Islander, Middle Eastern, or other communities of color. So we also speak about a BIPOC focus. That there's a strategic focus on stewarding and sustaining artistic and other cultural traditions rooted in and specific and defined communities of color, the elevating the awareness of communities' contribution to regional culture. It is a history of community impact. It has demonstrated a history of supporting and engaging with their own specified or defined community of color. This history can be generations, it can be months, but it must be made clear that the work that you do has impact beyond the singular artist's career, and that has resonance within our communities. This is not about a singular project, but how these funds can sustain and build on histories and continue to support our artists and our communities of color. BIPOC cultural legacies, so that we are inviting those who are recognized as supported, recognized source of inspiration, support, and our contribution to the history, culture, vibrancy, and identity of BIPOC artists and our Houston residents. And we are asking that there is at least a staff person or an identified person who can support the management and execution of the funds. They do not need to be paid, but they do need to be identified in order for us to continue to build a relationship. What can this grant cover? It can cover staff, personnel, it can cover paying off debt, it can cover equipment, infrastructure, existing or new programming, training and expertise building, rent or mortgage, insurance. So it can cover quite a bit. We are interested in what needs are, we're asking you to tell us where you want to prioritize the money and what the needs are. So grants application review process. I think that's correct in this. You are going to, like, the deadline to submit is October 22nd by 5 p.m. And that once the submission happens, that there's going to be a 3-step process that HAA and me and this BANF staff, which is me, will do an eligibility review. And then in order to make sure that you meet all of the criteria that I just went through. Then we will actually do a panel review in which your narrative questions will be submitted and shared with our Accountability Advisory Council and the panel of community nominated reviewers. We'll go through the process and identify who are the criteria and work again, to rate those against the criteria and then be able to judge forward. And then the AAC and the nominated in the panel will actually propose a slate of our grantees. And that it will be the steering committee and myself who will continue to verify in order to make sure that all things are in order and that we can be in communication and relationship with everybody to start that grant process. So just to cover, like, the award determination, by December of 2020, BANF will invest $2 million into our local arts community and will support a broad range of applicants by varying organizational sizes, different areas of Greater Houston area, and cultural communities. The awards are up to 50% of applicants' operating budget are capped at $50,000. Oops, that just went. Let me stop this share for a second. Yes, I think there are. I will talk about final report and just kind of some of the other and the key dates and assistance. But right now, Yedi, can you take us through the application and submittable?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank
So
you.
I will share my screen here very conveniently, right on the BANF website, big blue button that says apply now. So before even starting, there are really helpful guidance in terms of the guidelines. Always feel strongly about reading the guidelines in advance, and then the worksheet. So even before starting a submittable platform, you're able to see what does an application entail and to be able to collect all those documents in advance. So it's a great page document that kind of just walks you through all the definitions, terms, and what to expect. So right on, after clicking apply now, it takes you to our submittable page. And again, guidelines are available directly here. And then you submit. It does require a submittable account. So if you don't have a submittable account, like right here, it will ask you to create an account, which is pretty easy in that platform. And then it goes through all the application requirements, and then it will go through all the fields. And so you can scroll down, you can save draft. At the end, you can always click that blue, that outline button to make sure that you're saving your work. You can come back to it. If there's multiple people working on the application, you can always add them as collaborators as well. So you can, be able to submit an application as an organization. If you have any questions about the technical abilities of submittable, they do have a really great knowledge base as well. That be this little question mark, and you can find whatever issue that you're having with, where it's like, with the tables or the data and any of that information. So it's pretty straightforward, and please let us know in the support desk. I will share that link to be able, if you have any questions about the process, if you have any questions about the application themselves, we are available through the support desk.
Thanks, Edie. I think please read the guidelines, and we hope that the application and the guidelines will be available in Spanish as well as the application worksheet. We hope that you have the opportunity in order to work through have a worksheet, and so that you understand all the questions prior to needing to go online and submitting in that component. Let's see. Let me now again share my screen in terms of final report. So BANF will not require a traditional final report from grantees awarded in this round. We will ask all grantees to designate at least one representative from their leadership team to attend a listening and learning session scheduled in 2022. We want to make this relatively simple in terms of operation, but also engage in a network. And so that the idea will that we'll be able to come together, hopefully, safely and within health guidelines to be in community, to learn from each other and learn with each other. Key dates. Application deadline is Friday, October 22nd at 5 p.m. We will not be doing an extension, or we will not be, and please get information in that prior to that. We will do award notifications by December 20th of 2021, and working through the contracts, and that the payments will be dispersed in January. The BANF team, we actually will provide support via information sessions like this one, scheduled meetings, and then phone calls and submissions to the support desk. I think in the chat, you will also have access to with the support desk, and it's support.houston@banf.org. You can always email us directly at info@houstonbanf.org, or call us Monday through Friday, 10 to 3. And hopefully, and then we will leave us a voicemail message if we're not available, and we'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. So it is now time for Q&A. Please, if you either raise your hand or go ahead and drop the Q&A, your questions in the Q&A box. Okay, and so yes, can you submit as one organization applies to partnership with another sort? Yes, I think that let's be clear in terms of the organizations that are fiscal sponsors. They, being a fiscal sponsor does not exclude them from actually applying for them as its own project or its own work, not a project, as its own organization. And I believe that if you are, I think that you can try to submit if you want to submit as a partnership or a collaboration, that's possible. I don't really know in terms of what is going to be the likelihood in terms of funding of everything. But I think that if this is the work that you have a history of doing and continued can demonstrate how it will continue to serve our communities and Houston, I think that that is possible. So in terms of the funding grants amount to be decided, no, I think that you do not, that you are not asking for a specific amount. We just do an application, and we are going to determine what the funding is in relationship to how many applications that we have and how we can actually distribute this how we can distribute in that aspect. And so we are going to be looking at it specifically in terms of it will not be more than 50% of the general operating budget of the organization, but that the minimum grant will be around $5,000. Are there other?
There's a question in the chat. Does the fiscal sponsor need to be a BIPOC founded organization?
So no, it doesn't. Thank you for that question. I think that what we are interested in supporting in terms of a fiscal sponsorship is a relationship, and making sure that if you are an artist or arts collective, go with where your relationships are and continue to strengthen that aspect. But we are having the fiscal sponsor info session in order so that we can demonstrate how Fresh Arts, Community Arts Collective, and Community Music Center of Houston are providing some of those aspects. And so yes, it does not have to be specific. So the fiscal agency does not have to be specifically BIPOC.
There's one other question in the chat. What genres are eligible?
As long as it is a supporting an arts, like a BIPOC arts community, and is demonstrative of arts and culture that is part of and celebrates a BIPOC arts community and the art and the individuals in it, I believe it's eligible.
Okay. So now I'm in the question and answer area. Are you only considering existing projects or organizations?
So as long as you're able to demonstrate that there is a history of work, and that so it doesn't have to be an existing organization. Let's say that I think that I know of people who actually hosted open mic nights for multiple years, but they actually haven't created a specific organization around that. So this is an opportunity in order to do that. But I think that we are discouraging people to create a collaboration or create something specifically for this opportunity. It is about work that has already been existing and work that we can continue to amplify.
Okay. And I'm going to stay in that question and answer box, and then I'll go back over to the chat after I answered or send these few questions. Okay, so the next one, if an organization is a grant recipient from one of the supporting foundations, is it still eligible to apply to this initiative?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. Easy answer. The next question, if you have a nonprofit that has just started, can it be a sponsor?
Actually, set us a time and email us about that, and let's actually talk through that more specifically. I think that there's some logistics that I want to make sure that we're talking through before I actually can answer that question specifically.
Okay, awesome. So I'm gonna do one more in the question and answer box, and then I'll go back over to the chat. Meaning, will you consider pitches for new programs, events, campaigns, or organizations? So I think this is a follow-up question to, are you only considering existing projects or organizations? And again, they're asking, are you considering pitches for new programs, events, campaigns, or organizations?
Again, I think that we're going to go back to the criteria of a history of support and history of serving our communities. And I don't know if that is, as long as you have proven work in this component, I think that, and you can answer the question of why you exist and how you continue to serve and like what is your purpose and why you continue to move forward. I think that those are the questions that I need you to be able to, that we need to be able to, for you to answer.
So going back over to the chat, we have a question, are in-kind items necessary?
No, they're not necessary, but I do say that we do recognize that there are many of our organizations and entities that, particularly in our communities of color, have significant in-kind opportunities, and that we have volunteer opportunities as well as other ways in which we get in-kind support. And part of that question is to identify how organizations and entities are tracking that in-kind support, and so that we have a better idea of what our communities are doing.
Okay. Next question. I saw the other day in the application area, the classifications for org demographic, gender identity included male and female. Is that an error? So I think we can double look at the application just to make sure that that's correct. Yeah. And we can get back to you. I think that was from Institute of Hispanic Culture. So we'll just follow up via email.
Thank you, Deidre.
So the next question is there a minimum number of years of operational existence for an organization? We are a recently formed organization. Can we apply? So,
yeah, again, like it doesn't, we don't require a number of years. I do say that the more that you actually can demonstrate the history of the work and your impacts within communities and engagement, I think the stronger it will be. It'll make it easier for our panel in order to be able to understand the work that you were doing.
okay, so that closes out the current questions in the chat. So I'm going to go back over to the Q&A section. And we have two more. So does the fiscal sponsor need to be based in Houston or outlying county?
And no, they do need to be a 501c3, and they do need to be, and what we do require for submission is that we do need to have a signed letter between the primary applicant and the fiscal sponsor saying that there is a fiscal sponsorship agreement and that there is a contract in order to make sure.
Awesome. Next question is, do you have to use the funds within a certain time period?
We are not saying that things have to happen within a specific time period. We are expecting that because that this is an opportunity and relationship to immediate crisis, then you can utilize it for the work within the year. I would say that it is not officially needs to be within a year, but I do think that this is an opportunity fund in order for us to help you within to achieve your goals this year.
Next question, can you apply as an independent artist and you have a group? I guess, and if you have a group, can you apply under both?
I'm sorry, I think.
So I think there's two parts of the question. One, can you apply as an independent artist?
No.
Which currently, overall, this initiative will engage independent artists, but not at this current phase, right?
Correct.
And then the second question is, if you have a group, I'm assuming like a collective, can you apply under the collective?
We will accept applications under a collective. We're not accepting applications in this round around individual artists. And so, Alice, thanks for the question. I think that what we do recognize that in future rounds of funding, that this grant, this $5,000 to $50,000 is a one-time round, and that future rounds of funding will actually be, will most likely be larger multi-year grants. But that is something that we are still trying to determine how best to support and what that looks like.
You were answering the question from Alice?
Correct.
Okay. And then, so the next question is, since this is a multi-year fund, does the organization apply every year, even if the organization is a recipient of the current fund?
So I think that goes to this moment. Like right now, we are focusing on this specific opportunity by the end of this year. We are utilizing, we are again trying to learn and understand what is happening within our communities and understanding how you are doing your work, and in particular in light of the COVID pandemic and where ideas and issues are. We will then work with our community board, steering committee, and AAC in order to determine how best to prioritize what next rounds of fundings might look like.
Thanks. So the next question, is there an opportunity for for-profit companies to get involved or provide online? If so, how? Fiscal sponsorship, via partnership?
So at this point, because of the ways in which our funding is and liabilities, it has to go through a 501c3. I believe that if you are a corporation or a for-profit company, I encourage you to think about partnerships, collaborations, and be able to work with our communities and best serve. I think that there are many ways for entrepreneurial and visionary innovative practices that we're interested in hearing more about.
Okay, so I'm going to go through the 3 more questions and then go back to the chat. So how many grantees will there be?
We're not exactly sure. I think it all depends on how many applicants come in. And we do know that we are giving in the range of $2 million. And so we will figure out from that what it is. We know that there's going to be at least 40 and that there'll be less than 400.
Okay, so next question is, can two different organizations apply if they have the same organizational leader for both?
I think that you might need to email us and get us more specific answers to that, because I think that that's yeah, if you can just email us and give us a little bit more detail.
Okay, awesome. Final question from the Q&A section. So you can apply as an independent artist when that app opens if you have already applied within a group the first round. So yes.
So yes, this round of funding does not exclude you from any future rounds of funding or conversations.
Okay, awesome. So we have just one more question so far in the regular chat. And so two more. Can individual artists apply if they find a fiscal sponsor as a new agreement previously not worked with, or is an established history preferred?
So if we're talking about the artist collectives or entities can have a new relationship with a fiscal sponsor. And we are, one of the reasons why we are doing the info session on next Monday is to introduce you to at least 3 programs that we know of that have been doing fiscal sponsorship, and that they are available in order to engage new fiscal sponsees in that process. We do recognize, like, again, that this is about, we are interested in networks, we are interested in support, and we are interested in community. So how do we make sure that we can continue to engage those organizations and entities that have been doing the work and continue to and can sustain the work for the future?
Right. So the next 2 questions are similar, and it's whether or not a fiscal sponsor can sponsor multiple groups.
Yes. A fiscal sponsor can apply for the organization themselves. And let's just take a community artists collective. They can apply, but they will also be applying on behalf of whoever their fiscal sponsees might be.
So that answers our next question, that essentially, even if the fiscal sponsor is applying for funding itself, and if I heard you correctly, the entity can apply separately as their own, submit their own application, as well as submit applications on behalf of fiscally sponsored projects.
Absolutely. And I think that, Michelle, like the idea about competing against yourself, I think one of the driving criteria for me and how we are trying to do is that we recognize that this is a competition, that many funding opportunities are competitions. And part of what we are trying to understand with BANF and the work that we're trying to do is how do we make sure that the competition, that communities of color are not being pitted against each other, and organizations of color are not pitted against each other. And in what ways can we operate from a space of abundance instead of a space of scarcity? And I do think that there's going to be realities in which that we are going to have to face as to what does that mean in theory and practice. But we do hope that this is a new opportunity and new ways of operating, and that is part of what we are continuing to explore.
Okay. So on the similar vein, if an entity has experience in fiscal sponsorship, how can the organization participate in the fiscal sponsorship IFO session you are planning? Please
email me at info@houstonbanf.org. And right now, I think that what we are going to do is we will demonstrate, we will open it up to questions and opportunities and just connect with me through there. Right.
We have another question. Can a nonprofit organization become a fiscal sponsor?
Yes, a 501c3 can become a fiscal sponsor. We do request that anybody who is new to fiscal sponsorship actually have a conversation with other organizations that have become fiscal sponsors and recognize that that there are issues and best practices that we want to encourage and to understand. So yes, nonprofit organizations can do it, but before we just want to make sure that everybody is building a healthy relationship and that we're also not creating more problems down the road.
Okay. Okay. So what would disqualify an application?
That it's not demonstrate a leadership, a BIPOC founded or leadership, does not actually live within the 9 county regions or exist or operate within the 9 county regions. And those would be some of the 2 primary criteria, or 3 primary criteria.
Yeah, I heard you, or just because you've said it repeatedly, just kind of going back to that history of doing work within the communities and being able to establish and document that. So this one's more of a comment, and it's related to the fiscal sponsorship discussion. So I'm just going to read it. I am so glad, thanks. My thinking is that fiscal agents should ensure that they are submitting apps for different types of projects on behalf of others than they submit for themselves. Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Are you or will you be providing any other kinds of support apart from funding, i.e. networking, mentoring, incubating opportunities for fledgling organizations and collectives?
Thank you. Those are really great ideas and really great great thoughts. Those are part of our that is part of our thinking and some of the models in which we're looking for future rounds of funding. We will recognize that this round is specifically around this $5,000 to $50,000 grants, and that future rounds that we are going to take a pause on what the granting looks like at the end and do an assessment in relationship with our communities and our grantees to understand how best to serve them in the future.
Okay. So far, I think we just have one more question. And will this be a sustainable grant fund, meaning will it be available to apply to for many years to come?
So this round and this way of granting in terms of this specific criteria and opportunity is for right now and for this moment, and is for by December by 2021. We are going to find new ways in which that we will develop the questions of how to develop a network, how to look at the learning, and what are the other supports that we can do, and in what ways that we will be able to sustain those types of relationships. So that will be something that will that we still need to get more information on and come back to you next year.
So far, that rounds out all of the questions, both in the Q&A section and the chat. So
thank you, Deidre. Thank you, Gady. Thank you, Bree, for all the support. And in terms of what's going on, I do see that there's a question about what is the next round of funding. At this point, right now, we are focusing on this round of funding and getting this $2 million out into the community. We're trying to recognize exactly where our organizations and who our organizations are at. And then we will take a pause in January to then understand who and where things, and then convene our community board, our steering committee, our AAC, in order to then create a much clearer timeline for what future rounds of funding will look like. So again, we are trying to do work that is different from other practices because we are trying to support a long-term communities and sustainability in this component, and we need to figure out how best to do that. Again, thank you everybody for attending. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for your questions. I hope that I've answered as many of them and as to the best extent that I can. We will have this recording available, and we will, and the transcript hopefully will be available later on this week. And then we also have another info session next week on Thursday at 9:30 in the morning, and then the fiscal sponsor info session at on Monday the 4th at 2 p.m. Please check our website, our social media, and in order for more updates and other questions. Also, please utilize our support desk and support.houstonbanf.org in order to pose more, if you have any other questions, or reach out. We're excited in order to be able to make this opportunity and to be able to provide resources to this community. We hope that that you are excited about the opportunity and that we can continue to live and move this. And so the social media ID is at Houston Banff on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. I think I have all of those, and we can put that in. Thank you, and it's now in the chat. Thank you, Yidi. Thank you all very much, and we look forward to reading more about and hearing more about your work and continuing our conversations in the future. Take care, be safe, and we will talk soon. Bye now.